And so we are fine-tuning every moment in presence is a fine-tuning, attuning to the divine wholeness, the being that you are in truth. Every moment in presence, fine-tuning the clarity of the knowing, illuminating disturbance, illuminating the patterns that can create disturbance through identification, fine-tuning. Coming to live without assumption. That a life lived with assumption is a life that is unquestioned and unexplored in its greatness, in its goodness, in its beauty and vastness. That we, as we fine-tune, we are seeing through convention, we are seeing through limitation, and we are opening to the unbounded freedom of the true one being that we are. The only thing we could possibly assume is that every single thing the mind says is not true. We're fairly safe there. But if our assumptions are a belief in thought, then we are off track. There is not a single thought that can be believed. There is nothing that can be believed. It is about the direct experience here, now, just simply being. Being so aware of how easy it is to be assumptive, to just think, oh, this is just the way things are. But the way things are most often according to some kind of deeply held patternings that are habitual and like well-worn grooves in the sense of your own life, which feels to be personal, but also in the collective, in society, in the culture. It's all inbred patterning. And we are pioneering the way out of the darkness of ignorance and separation and the remembering of the shining light of true nature. So how can we follow the old ways, the ways that it's always been, and stay conforming with convention and be free? We have to find the place in us that knows something brighter, something vaster, in order to question the supposed norms. We can learn that it is safe to align with the norms, to fit in, to not stand out, to be in accord with the way that egos want our behavior to be. But we can never be free as long as we are playing out those kind of patternings of limitation. And so this invitation is an invitation to blow it all apart. The whole of the structure that we have come to believe is just the way it is the norm, and that we have to be in accord with it. It is to see in our clear inner vision the truth as something brighter and bigger. And that we have this incredible possibility of bringing this bright greatness, vastness to the surface of life for all beings. The more that we live this truth, we are offering this possibility of freedom for all beings. So we are pioneering. And that is why it is so important not to continue to conform and fit in. If that spark to know this truth is alive in you, then you are being called into service. You are being called into the greatest possible service of the time, we could say. And that is to fine tune and know yourself and live this and shine this possibility for all beings. As long as we are trying to play it safe, be seen, be in accord, make friends, we will live in separation. We will not live in freedom. That is why the grace of our companionship in the love of truth is so precious and so rich, because to share this love, to share this light, to share this opening, blossoming, it is so precious and so alive and so necessary, that there are beings with a depth of insight and courage that can follow the light of truth in and in and in and fine tune, live this. The living of this, the natural living of this, is to naturally embody this. We don't have to learn some kind of conceptual idea of embodiment. Just to live it is to embody it. So where these words resonate, where they bring a sense of aliveness, it is to fall into the aliveness. This is where the attunement happens, where we can break open the crusty old ways. We can break open those well-worn grooves and show that there are shinier, more clear, vibrant ways of living as life itself, in utter harmony with the divine, which is to live in harmony with nature. Now, as we say yes and open to this, it can, in a way, curiously feel like, as we come to know that there is no separation and we come to know our own freedom, it can feel in a certain way that we are creating a kind of separation from ignorance, from the mainstream. And that can feel a little challenging sometimes to the mind, because it does ask us to not flow in the mainstream and to see through conformity, to see through where convention is holding a sense of separation. It is this incredible invitation, and yet the mind will possibly, likely even, find ways of feeling a little uncomfortable with that. But to pioneer, to be invited to shine this light at this time, is an invitation to open to something that perhaps your friends and family are not necessarily opening to, and that you are the light in the community that you have known as your family or companions. And so if you are the light, what incredible grace to be the light. And it's not about trying to share anything or convert anyone or being evangelistic in any way. It's about living this. It's about living this vibrant, joyous truth. It's about living happy. It's about living in a way that is way showing and illuminating just in the silence and naturalness of being yourself. That as the life starts to shift and open and be lived in more freedom, that naturally the resonance of your aliveness, the aliveness of your nervous system, starts to transmit a frequency. And this is the service, this is the grace, is to live this and be the living frequency of this truth, and to be fine-tuning the frequency so that it is getting finer and finer and finer. You, in fact, need not say anything to anyone, but just to live true. Live true. Let it be felt. Let it be witnessed. Let the love be recognized. Let the peace of your heart be recognized. There is no opposition to this truth. When we are not moving from mind, there is no opposition. How could any being oppose love and happiness and beauty? Of course, if there is any sense of personhood that wants to be seen, wants to be recognized, wants to be special, then that will create a sense of opposition, because specialness is just another protection. And of course, this opening is the great humbling out of any sense of protection. And so as we open to this freedom, this grace, this love, we do not shroud ourselves with a new outfit, a new persona of specialness, of having got something, recognized something, or being somehow superior in any way. It is in the silence, it is in the humble silence of just being, where we do not need to draw any attention to anything, that we just live this truth. We just love and shine, just in our own radiant, lived moment. No words need to be spoken. And so to be aware of how specialness can come forward, and how specialness is a sense of protection and a way of dividing. The one in the young life that has felt somehow not seen aspires to specialness, aspires to a kind of success, a kind of achievement, will possibly have some sense of perfectionist tendency and will want to do this perfectly. But all of that will act as an obscuration for this true light to shine. The shining light is a light of peace and openness and clarity, where every single moment is a subtle attunement, where no assumptions are followed, nothing is taken for granted. Every moment is an opportunity to open and see through another thread, another layer, another way that the habit to collaborate with separation plays out. And it's a joyous celebration to just keep seeing all of the ways that there are holding patterns in place, and to never assume that we have gone all the way through and we have completed anything, to never assume anything, because assumption is only of the mind. It is just to be the living, fresh awakeness of this moment, to be the joyous emptiness, the blissful emptiness of this moment. Your eyes can only shine when there is nothing behind them, right? When they are not focused upon the me. What does this mean for me, right? So it is just to shine with your focus inward, in the presence of being, focused upon the divine, in absolute holy union with the divine wholeness. Not a word need be spoken. Just let the frequency, the fine frequency of what is recognized, sing its silent song in service, in humble service. But it is not even about that. It is about this moment. It is about the now. It is about just this, what is. That what is just is. That we can come to just simply be here. That what is just is. And we are that isness of this moment. Just simply being. So just the felt sense of being here, just the felt sense of being here, present, open, empty, to feel the resonance of your own presence, attune to the finer frequency of being in the silence, in the stillness, the naturalness that is always here underneath the moving, changing, the natural openness that is simply just here, just like this, what is, and to attune to this true nature, your true nature, to be this living truth. Simple living truth, right here, now. Attuned to the subtle, fine frequency of peace, of openness, that it is not about a doing, it is about being. And so when we speak about living this, falling into this presence and just being here, it's always now here. It's timeless being. Sometimes the mind can hear this and can imagine that it has to create a strategy for letting go of everything in the life in order to create a cave-like existence. But that is not so. It is about being this living presence here now, in the face of life, right here in the center of life, living itself. Whatever your seeming life looks like, it's to be this living presence and resonating at this fine frequency of truth, right in the center of life living itself, whatever it looks like. That we're not speaking about giving up everything and creating a monk-like existence. We're speaking about that this true simplicity is in the knowing of yourself. That true renunciation is not a renunciation of the world and the happenings. It's a renunciation of the mind. Now, some beings move through a physical, let's say, renunciation of the world in order to come to a simplicity and find this truth. But it is not necessary. If it is to be the path, then it is obvious. And for some beings, that is the path. But for most beings, it is to live in what might be called like a householder, but to be so present in the now, in the being, and to recognize that the renunciation is the renunciation for of the mind. And now it's the same for every being, even if a being is pulled to a path which is more monk-like, right? That more traditional sense of renouncing the world and creating a cave-like, simple existence. Even for those beings, true renunciation is the renunciation of the mind. It's just a way of creating a set of circumstances where perhaps that is more possible. But renunciation, to give it all up, is to give up the belief in the mind. You cannot do giving up the mind. You cannot create a strategy for that. It is through watching, witnessing, being aware, and not following the beliefs, not following the assumptions, questioning everything. And the questioning of everything is not so much a mental questioning or contemplation, although a certain kind of contemplation where something that is being noticed is just held in presence can be supportive. But what we are speaking of is a questioning that is a true inquiry, which is to inquire and question, is this true? Do you know this to be true? Is it a belief? What is true? What can you confirm is true in this moment? And what we find is that we can only confirm as true the direct experience of being here now. It's the only truth that can be directly confirmed. Everything else is thought. So when we are aware and watching, and we see that that's a thought, is it true? Is it the truth? Without a thought, is that here? And what we're speaking of in these thoughts are the thoughts that create separation, the thoughts that create identification, the thoughts that create misery and stress, the thoughts that are about a me protecting and getting my needs met, all of the ways that protection happens. And it's to naturally come to a place where we are so ready and willing to question everything, because it just becomes too tight and uncomfortable to move in those patterns of limitation. And it becomes uncomfortable to move in the patterns of limitation because we are opening to recognize the pure consciousness, the pure being that is free. And so to move in patterns that are quite obviously not free, the limitation starts to be very obvious. Whereas we've moved in patterns of limitation without noticing because they're the regular groove, right? The habits. As we open to more spaciousness and clarity and freedom, the patterns of limitation just become uncomfortable, and we start to be able to shine the light and see those patterns. We can recognize this is not truth. This is habit. This is somehow playing out the functioning of the me in the desires, the wants, the needs, in resistance, right? We just start to be able to notice more clearly. And in the noticing, that witnessing offers this possibility for the light to shine upon. And when the light shines upon a limited pattern, or a pattern of disturbance or discordance that is arising. It is this great graced opportunity for some kind of old stress to surface, to be met in the sensation, in the nervous system, to be transmuted in the presence of kindness and love, in the presence of compassion, and shift those discordant, limited patternings to more freedom, to openness, to a finer frequency. So every moment is the possibility of renouncing the mind, the beliefs, the habits. And no one is watching you. No one is marking your book. You are in this process with yourself, with your divine self. And it is all about being so fine, attuned, sincere, willing, wholehearted, that there is the readiness to be humbled, to surrender deeper and deeper into the knowing of the being. So the recognition of the being, the taste of the being, and the felt sense of the freedom is quite simple and easy to open to. What is hard, we could say, is to stay here, to abide here, because abiding here requires a refinement of the nervous system to a finer frequency, to be able to, on some level, hold the finer frequency, on, we could say in a different way, to recognize, subtly recognize the finer frequency and attune to it. But all of life is creating the possibility for that refinement to happen so that we can abide here. Now, in a way, it seems like a process in time, and there's a way that it is, but it also cannot be measured. It is not a process in time that says, after this many years you get here, and after this many years you get here, because the parts that we don't know is how refined is the nervous system already? How much merit do we have from past lives? How much of the eternal living has the soul already worked through and freed, right? So we do not want to get stuck or bound in ideas of what this process is, or creating a linear structure, or trying to create a form out of the formless. It is just to continue in the moment here now, to fine-tune, surrender to the intelligence of your own consciousness. And the surrender to the intelligence of your own consciousness is to be here now in the felt sense of presence, the aliveness of the presence of now, of your own nervous system, which is your own consciousness. And here, the wisdom takes over. The intelligence is just moving everything. It always is. It's moving everything, whether we imagine that we're doing and we're controlling. That's all just being created out of the consciousness. It's just that limited patterns are creating limited functioning, right? So we can't really do anything to change anything at all. It's just as it is right now. But we can stop, be here, and in the stop, in the stillness, we recognize what is the felt sense of being that is here. And we, as the awareness, we shift the attention So this is not someone doing something. It's the attention of awareness shifting to the outward focus being upon the moving, changing, to an inward focus being upon the presence. Now, the curious, miraculous thing is that life still lives itself exactly the same. You still have the same family, still have the same companions. The environment is still the same. Everything stays the same. It's the perspective of seeing that changes when you are resting in the presence. And when you are resting in the presence of now, this is how the refinement of the nervous system happens. It's how we open more subtly to the fine frequency, is by recognizing the fine frequency, by attuning. And the attunement happens in the aliveness of the presence, in the stillness, in the silence. And the more that we attune to the frequency, the resonance, it refines the system to be able to more subtly perceive even finer frequencies. And this is where the opening happens. And this is where the true nourishment is. And this nourishment nourishes the nervous system to carry us deeper. And it also has this possibility of multidimensional nourishment. So it nourishes and rejuvenates the more physical aspect, the physiology. Everything is refined the more that we are living in this presence, in the attuned recognition of the resonance. That the attuned recognition of the resonance is underlying all of life. In fact, we could say more truly, it's animating all of life, right? So to start with, it feels like it's underlying all of life, like your life moving, changing, and underneath it in the background is a sense of this stillness, this silence. But as we open to recognize the stillness and the silence and the resonance here, the resonance is recognized to be an aliveness, an awakeness, which is flowing within itself. And as we recognize the flow of life flowing in itself, we start to feel that that flow is actually animating the form, it's giving life to the form, and it's giving life to all of life. Can recognize this often quite easily in nature. We can feel the flow of the aliveness in our own true nature, in our own presence, and we can feel the same life is animating everything. Because in a way, you're seeing a picture and life is creating the picture. And the more that you're attuned to pure life, you see pure life. The more that you're attuned to my life, you see a reflection of your discordance, right? A reflection of your filters, right? So the more that we are attuned to pure life flowing, we see a reflection of pure life flowing. And we can see that same reflection that we could see in nature and feel in nature, in everyone, in everything, that every being is just this light, pure life flowing. When we're not looking for a way of interacting to be seen or liked or validated, we have no attachment to how we're seen. We just see life. We just know love. There's a deep care, deep, deep care and love for every being in truth. But we don't care what anyone thinks of us because we're not thinking. We're not in the realm of thinking. And we're not in the realm of moving from protection, of interacting to say the right thing, watching, oh, how was that received? What do I need to say next in order to make the environment, make this interaction feel comfortable, right? We're not measuring everything in this minute detail through our protective filters. We're just flowing as life. And so just to notice that when you are resting in the openness of true nature and flowing as life, more of that life just flows. There's a naturalness. There's an unguarded, unedited freedom in the ways that we move in the world and interact. Yes, sometimes we smile and say, wow, look at that. Look at what she did. Look at what they did, right? Because we can see the way the character is moving, but there's no attachment to our own, we could say our own movements, because we know that we're not the character. So it doesn't matter what the character does. It doesn't matter what anyone does. The deep knowing is that you're the aliveness of life, and life is intelligently living itself, and whatever it does is somehow what it needs to do right now, whatever that looks like. So we stop being so bothered by the particulars and details and the happenings. We're not concerned about how things happen, not concerned about anything. We're just resting in the presence of being, in the openness, in the love that is the true essence nature of all beings. And so as these words come, just to feel the attunement of where truth can be recognized in the presence, in the nervous system, but also where in the consciousness, the intelligence can recognize truth, where you can recognize that when you're resting in the openness and interacting and moving from this openness, there's more ease and flow. So the intelligence starts to recognize itself. So this recognition is all encompassing on every level, but the recognition is happening in the nervous system. Notice that. Notice how whatever you're recognizing about what is being spoken here, it's creating a resonance of recognition in your nervous system. And that resonance of recognition in your nervous system brings more of an aliveness. And as there's more of an aliveness, there's even more of a recognition, more of a sense of being the alive flow, more of a sense of maybe just being the deep peace. It doesn't matter where we are in this unfolding. Where we are is exactly perfect. And it is to be so fully resonating where we are, not wanting to be further ahead, not wanting to try to be seen as getting it, because all of that acts as an obscuration. We only deepen through resonating at the finest possible frequency we can. So when we resonate with the truth of our direct experience, we're resonating at a frequency that is alive. And this is where, you know, as we start to be in companionship, it's where we start to have a transmission, a shared transmission of the frequency. Beings might say, oh, I love being with you. I feel it's just lovely. I just love it. I love your company. They don't know why. Or they might say, I feel really peaceful when I'm with you. Or I just start spilling all my beans and telling you all these deep innermost secrets, right? Because you're resonating at a frequency which is pulling forward, like the holy poultice, pulling forward anything that's discordant into the light. But you're resonating. And so it's where you start to have a transmission, because when you're resting in the finest possible frequency, you're resonating at a frequency of truth. Now, of course, we don't want to be concerned about, have I got a transmission? Or, because as soon as we get concerned about things like that, kills it, right? Flatline, because you're in the mind. So, but we're just bringing alive things that you might be noticing in the direct experience, and in the naturalness of it. It's so beautiful, right? It's so beautiful because we're opening like a flower. We're opening like a flower. And as we open like a flower, there's a fine frequency, like a fine perfume that just starts to fill the air, let's say, right? And the flower that you are, it's like the bees start to come for the nectar. But at the same time, the beauty is you're also a bee, right? We never stop being the bee that's always tapped in and taking in the nectar of the divine. And in fact, only when we are taking in the nectar of the divine, sipping in the nectar of the divine like a little bee or a butterfly or a hummingbird, right? We have to be sipping in the sweetness of divine nectar for our flowering to happen. And then as our flowering happens, how we are a light for the world is that without knowing, we start offering our nectar, our perfume to be sipped, right? But we can only offer our perfume to be sipped when we are sipping. We have to constantly be sipping the divine nectar of our own recognition, right? It's so beautiful, because this is why we can never come to any kind of specialness or put ourselves upon the shelf of realization or having got something or making business cards, right? All this kind of nonsense, right? Because as long as we're putting ourselves in some kind of position, then we forget to sip. We forget to sip. And if we forget to sip the nectar of the divine that keeps humbling us, that keeps the surrender of life surrendering, then suddenly, life will just bring something in that humbles us, something that pulls that rug out once again, brings us to our knees, brings us right flat on our face in the dirt, so we can remember to sip, so that we can remember that the true nature, the divine, is pure humility. We can never be someone who is humble. We can try, but we will usually stink of all that efforting, right? So we have to just remember to sip. Just remember to sip in the presence of now, in the presence where there's nothing that's known, where we hold no position, we know nothing. We're just sipping, and we're in the flow of divine surrender. We're in the flow of divine devotion, and we're just sipping and sipping and just falling in and in and in. And then the naturalness. So beautiful how the natural flow is self-sustaining. That's how wholeness is whole. It's because it completely sustains itself. It needs nothing other than its own momentum of sincerity, of sincere surrender. All that it requires is a perpetual devoted surrender into itself, to wholeheartedly sustain itself, right? That's how wholeness is whole. So we just, as we open to the flow of our knowing, we open to the flow of life living itself, and the flow of life is surrendering into itself. So what that looks like in our human lived experience is what we speak of as this transmutating loop, transmutative loop of the lived embodied experience, which is that life living itself is in perpetual surrender to itself. So what that looks like on the practical level is that we're open and receiving whatever happens. We're receiving on the level of the nervous system and the sensation, transmuting the discordant feelings in the nervous system, bringing the discordant to the pure consciousness, because we know the pure consciousness. Here it is, pure consciousness. Here's the discordant. That our lived experience is a constant opening through feeling the feelings and recognizing in the nervous system, bringing this limitation to the unlimited, right? Constantly. And this is refining in a way in between here. This is in between this is the flow, and we're refining the ability for this to be very smooth. In the beginning, it's like crunchy. No, right? It's like this, it's crunchy, but we're refining the ability to just say, oh, old stress, feel the feelings in the nervous system, transmute, remember, open. Resistance, remember, old stress, feel the feelings, feel it in the nervous system. Nothing personal here, feel the feelings, the sensations. Let there be a great releasing, come to pure consciousness, remember, open. Right? This is the process of our lived experience. And the great glory is that this process is the self-sustaining mechanism for divine wholeness, that the divine wholeness, the light, is radiantly shining, feeding off of its own brilliance, right? It's using its own brilliance as like a generator, like a divine, luminous, oh my goodness, generator, right? And feeding off of its own brilliant, radiant, luminous fineness, the fine frequency. But that creates awareness, creates consciousness. And now the light of awareness, the light of consciousness, is that same divine light of wholeness. And that's why we want to follow through to the fine frequency, so that we find the source. We find the source as deeply as we can find the source, which starts off to be the source is the presence of now. And we keep opening. What's the source? Oh, the source is in the flow, the nervous system, right? To start with, it feels like it's just in the stillness, the silence, the peace. And then we find the source is like a flow of life. It's the unified field flowing, life flowing within itself. We find the flow of life as the source. And we keep opening. Well, what's the source of that? Where does that come from? And we keep opening to the finer and finer frequency, right? And as we open, it's like the denser frequency collapses into the finer frequency, and then it integrates, and then the finer frequency collapses into an even finer frequency, right? But the great glory is we can still access all areas. We can still access the surface of life. We're not having to take on a denser frequency. We're just, the finest frequency can access all areas. It's got a universal pass, right? So because it's creating it all out of its own intelligence, so it can go anywhere. So we're surrendering deeper and deeper, finer and finer, back to the source of the source, finer and finer, surrendering and sipping all the way, right? This is what is happening. We're carrying everything that seems like baggage. We're surrendering it to the source. Give it to God, give it to God, give it to the mother, give it to the divine, surrender it in, feel the sensation, surrender it in. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to work it out. Don't try to make it go away. Don't resist it. Just hand it over through feeling it. It's like a huge, crazy storm. And you just stand right there, right in the eye of the storm. You don't go and get an umbrella or a raincoat, right? You don't try to protect yourself. You just get wet, right? You just get totally, totally wet, right? That's what it's like to really just live this life, without a raincoat, without an umbrella. Just let it rain, because the rain is not going to hurt you, right? I think there was a song about that once. The rain's not going to hurt you, right? So you just let it rain. You let it rain when it rains, and you let it be sunny when it's sunny, because you know that these are just weather patterns, and you're never, ever touched by the weather patterns, because the peace of the being is stable, is certain, is deep and unmoving, and where you can recognize that there is a felt sense of presence that is always stable. This is the sanctuary, and this is what we continually fall into as the source, the deeper silence, the fine resonant frequency of our own presence. We fall in. We never arrive in surrender. We never surrender and then we're here. Oh, surrender's done. We never, ever stop, because surrender is the flow of life. Surrender is the nature of life, surrendering into itself, right? A naturalness, an intelligence that is in constant surrender to itself, right? You don't find those leaves on the tree in the fall looking for an anti-aging serum, right? So that they could perhaps try and keep themselves a little bit supple for a little longer, right? No, they're just in the intelligence, right? They just let go. They just get crispy and fall off, right? It's okay. It's nature, right? They're not trying to sip up green juice, eat goji berries, you know. They're just like, okay, let's let go, right? No power shakes for the forest, right? It's just let it go, let life live itself, let the intelligence, right? But the great thing is that nature has all that it needs to nourish itself in perfect timing. And the more that we attune, we can attune to that flow of nature that knows how to nourish itself with pure life. We learn to nourish ourselves actually with pure prana, with pure life, through living as life, through opening to receive the vital energy of our own recognition. This is where the vital energy is, right? That the aliveness of life that is ever, ever alive. We open to just receive the nourishing flow, the rejuvenative flow. But we're not in any kind of concept about trying to resist the natural decay of the finite, right? That the finite will naturally decay. It already is, right? But we're rejuvenated through the recognition of knowing what is eternal and timeless, what is ever alive. And then this natural balancing starts to happen. that can rejuvenate the physical, the physiology, the vital, can come in and rejuvenate the physical. It can shift. It can usher away unwanted visitors that are creating burdensome situations in the physical. But we're not trying to push against nature, right? We're not trying to swim upstream. We're just moving in natural accord. Yeah. So here we are in this moment, in the presence of now. There's just a simple recognition of truth in the direct experience of simply being. That nothing is more revitalizing than being the flow of life, surrendering into itself, letting go of what no longer is relevant. And that looks like letting go of certain situations, companionships, relationships. It looks like the letting go in divine timing and not trying to hold it all together. It looks like just allowing life to live itself, to reinvigorate itself, and to nurture itself. That we're just living as this flow of life in total harmony and balance with itself. And the intelligence brings forward all that we need in order to support this natural flow. But really, it's all about just being here, just being here. The simplicity of life is so incredibly beautiful that we don't need to interfere. The poignancy of the human experience is so fully a part of its beauty. The fragility and tenderness of the lived experience, it's all part of the richness and beauty. And every single part of the cycle is a wise flow of life. Whatever it looks like, it's flowing to always carry us deeper into what is eternal, timeless, infinite freedom.